Next up, we got the temperate deciduous forest. This goes through a seasonality change, hot summers and cold winters. Precipitation's about 75 to 126 centimeters per year. The topsoil is rich in organic matter, and a deep clay rich lower layer, which tends to have all the minerals. And you can see here in the world where you find your temperate deciduous forests. See, we have the temperate deciduous forest here in Florida. And also found through Europe and a little bit of northern Middle East, and then also China, some down here in Australia, New Zealand, temperate deciduous forest, and very low in Argentina and Chile. Said seasonality changes. Now, we don't really get to see the seasonality and the seasons changing with the colors of the leaves here in Florida, but as you go north in the United States, you can see this. Some of the common plants are broadleaf hardwood trees, such as oaks, hickories, beeches, those that lose their foliage annually. They go through this color change and then they lose their leaves. Others are like evergreen trees and magnolias. Some of the common larger mammals are pumas, wolves, bison, which are actually now absent from the temperate deciduous forest. But we also still have deer, bears, and many smaller mammals and birds, like Bambi here. And this is somewhat what the deciduous forest looks like from the inside. Now, within a dense wooded area in our different types of forests, there are these different layers, and we're going to be talking later in this chapter more about this. But there's the canopy, which is at the top. There's the understory, which is below that, but not all the way down, and then the shrub, where your shrubs tend to grow up to. And then there's the forest floor. Okay, and you can see here, this is a really cool diagram with the intensity of sunlight. Where is sunlight the most intense? It's at the top, at the canopy. Where is it the least dense? Down at the forest floor and the shrub area. So in these different types of forests, it's all about this competition of which plant can grow the highest and get to the top to get that most abundant intensity of light. And those that are at the bottom do not do as well because they don't get as much light. And that's why you tend to not have as many shrubs and green at the bottom, depending on how dense the forest is. Looking at a food web here of the temperate deciduous forest, got our producers, primary consumers, deer, rodent, different types of birds and insects. Secondary consumers, you can see feeding off the insects, possums, birds, skunks, and then we also have owls and foxes feeding on these, and then we have our larger ones like cougars and bears, which are our tertiary consumers at the top. Some human impacts on the temperate deciduous forests. Europe and North America, land clearing for farms for tree plantations. So you can see here monocultures, when you see those trees in a row, like so, they have been planted there and they have some type of lumber purpose. Cities have removed much of the temperate deciduous forests, clearing for urbanization and human expansion. Worldwide, the deciduous forests are among the first biomes to be covered by agricultural use, as you can see here. During the 20th century, intensive agricultural practices were widely adopted. Overgrazing and deforestation have contributed to the degradation of many of these agricultural lands. So, as we perform poor practices with this agricultural land, after each cycle of planting crops and harvesting, the soil and the area is less fertile for more agricultural use. So these intensive agricultural practices have degraded these areas for future growth. Next up, we got the temperate grasslands. Summers here are hot, winters are cold, rainfall is usually uncertain. But you can look at an annual precipitation of 25 to 75 centimeters per year. The soil, nutrients, minerals tend to accumulate well in a defined layer just below the topsoil. But it can wash out with more precipitation and different types of flooding that can occur. Usually these grasslands tend to have very rich soil. Common plants, you have few trees that grow except near rivers and streams. Grasses grow in great profusion in the deep, rich soil. See here some of the grasslands. Here we have Northern American grasslands. Animals tend to be grazing animals like bison and elk. Wolves are here in this area. Coyotes, prairie dogs, foxes, black-footed ferrets, various types of birds of prey, grouse, which is chickens, wild chickens, or turkeys, reptiles, and great number of insects to support those different secondary consumers. Got a grassland food web here looking at something looks like is in the savanna. We have our producers, which are different types of small plants, grasses, and then you have your secondary consumers, tend to feed on large quantities of grasses, and then you have your, primary consumers and then secondary consumers, where they also could be tertiary depending on what they're feeding on. Some human impacts with the temperate grasslands. Since the soil is so rich, it is a great place to do agriculture. 90% of grasslands have vanished under the plow, and remaining prairies are very fragmented, so you have this separation of land areas where these different species of animals cannot be able to move from one from another. Today, the tall grass prairie grassland is considered North America's rarest biome. All right, because agriculture is such this place is such a good area to do agriculture.